Football isn't it's not a beauty contest. That's the first thing you have to realise. Football has never been a beauty contest. Football has been a question of being good enough with the players that you've got on the field to win the game. And to win football matches, sometimes you have to do lots of very, very different things in the game.
My guest today is a man whose history in the game of football is exceeded only by his passion for the future. A nurturing presence in English football who, aged 75, has come out of retirement in a profession he just can't quit. Most recently, coming back to a Crystal Palace in crisis after 10 months out of the game and calmly ripping off 5 wins over the course of a magnificently transformational last 10 games of the season to lead the club to the promised land of Premier League safety. It's a real joy to welcome this gent of carefully chosen words and immense experience, straight out of Croydon, manager of Crystal Palace Football Club. It's Mr. Roy Hodgson.
Thank you, Roger. Very kind.
You deserve far more, to be candid, but I want to start with that first retirement. When you left Palace after another season of safety, 2021, you said, "I've seen so many people retire with all of the fanfare blazing, only to surface again somewhere in a fairly short period of time. I'd prefer not to do that." And it was a wonderful way to ride off into the sunset. And before we talk about what came next, let's live in that bliss for a moment, Roy. Tell us what the best thing was about those liberated 7 months of retirement, your favourite part of unburdened life.
Well, we were able to do a little bit of travelling, which was good, because that's something my wife and I really wanted to do, but probably not quite as much as I would have liked, because Watford came just after the new year and asked me to fill in there and try to help them out of a crisis situation. So I must say that the time went so quickly that I don't really remember that much about it. But to go back to Palace was a bigger surprise in some way. I probably did think more after Watford that I wouldn't go back into football again. And I'm not certain if it had been anyone other than Crystal Palace and Steve Parish asking me alongside Doug Friedman if I would do it, that I would have actually considered it.
I mean, let's talk about Watford, January 2022. You then retired again, but then Crystal Palace, March 2023. And I'm reminded of a quote by the French poet Jean de La Fontaine: "A person often meets their destiny on the road that they took to avoid it." And Roy, you've said you don't go looking for jobs, that both Watford and Crystal Palace were offers that came to you. Is that your philosophy in general, to allow the world to work in mysterious ways and then you react as needed?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer, honestly. I don't know that I would probably be quite as philosophical as that about it. I mean, when I say that I allow jobs, if they're going to be jobs for me, to come my way, what I really mean was I don't have an active agent, and I've never really had an active agent who, when jobs become available, is canvassing the club to ask, what about my client? You know, why don't you take him? So in that respect, I've had to wait for jobs to come my way. And I've been lucky, I suppose, that, you know, I'm well enough known within football, especially amongst the people who are the movers and shakers, i.e. the people who own the clubs and the people who run the clubs, that sometimes they've been able to contact me and I've been able to take up the offer without even the help of an agent.
So take us there. March of this year, the offer to return to the Palace dugout came in to replace Patrick Vieira. Where were you? Who calls you? What was said? And what went through your mind and your heart, Roy?
Well, the call came out of the blue, of course. I certainly wasn't expecting a phone call. And it was Doug Friedman who actually made the call and sort of said, would this be a possibility? And he said, if so, Steve Parish and I would like to meet you at the earliest opportunity. And because it came out of the blue, I said, well, give me some moments here, because I need to speak to my wife, because she, funnily enough, does think I've actually retired. And now you are seriously suggesting that you want me to come back. But if she doesn't kibosh the idea, then it'll be good to meet you. And then I'll have a few questions, of course, for you, you know, because it was something which I really was not expecting. But it wasn't difficult for them to persuade me, and in fact I'm really, really pleased that they turned to me on that occasion, just as I'm pleased that they've turned to me once again. And in the same vein, I wasn't actually expecting that either. When I left after that period of time, which was what my contract was for, I didn't necessarily expect to be off to a new one.
Palace is a special club. You have a very special relationship with that club. You're Croydon born, a former player. Huge part of the club's sustained Premier League presence over the last decade is connected to you. Did that sense of special duty to this club play a factor? Or was it more just like, oh, I can get out of the house?
I hope it's a bit more than that. I mean, I was looking forward to the job and to working with the players again. If that was the case, it would have been more subconscious. I don't think it's something which I've sort of deliberately forced or required myself to think about. But it's been an easier decision to accept, if you like, any invitations that come my way, because I do know the club, I do know the players, I do know the owners, I do know the sporting director, I do know the way they like to work, and I know that the way they like to work fits in very much with the way that I'll be trying to work. So in that respect, it's a little bit easier to say, okay, if that's what you really want, and let's agree on it and plan what we are intending to do, then it's quite easy for me to fit in with it. But I'm not so certain that there's that other more, if you like, romantic notion that this is my alma mater. It's a little bit different to that, I think.
It wasn't like you answered the bat signal. You were just like, I can plug right in there. I can get this. Then I can't lie. The reaction to your appointment was mixed. Some papers called the move short-sighted, and few managers have as much experience as you at tuning it all out, Roy. It's really quite amazing how often you're like, I do not care what you say. In that noise, in that whirlwind, how have you learned to filter it all out over the years?
Well, it's really a question, I suppose, of things you can change and things you can't change. And I mean, you can't necessarily change. And, you know, sometimes your reputation, your image is built for you by people who don't really know you that well anyway. For me, the most important thing about coming back to replace Patrick, which surprised me because he was getting very, very good publicity, as he would, because he's such an iconic figure as a player in the football and has an awful lot of friends in football as a result of his time at Arsenal and Manchester City. So the fact is, I had to be sure that the decision that the club was taking was a decision that they'd thought long and hard about and something they really wanted to do, and that they would back me and the coaching staff to do the job that they said they would like us to do. Now, when that was sorted, if you like, or when we come to terms with that, I then had to come to terms with all the people on the TV who were either friends of Patrick's or who perhaps didn't like me in some way and their opinions. But that wasn't, I knew, going to really affect my chances of doing the job as I wanted to do it, because that security, if you like, came from Steve Parish and Dougie Freedman.
Came from the board, and that was all that mattered.
And luckily the players, you know, I was quite keen to know how the players would feel about me coming back, and they really assured me that they would be, you know, more than satisfied if I did.
Let's talk about that, because the Palace you returned to was 4 points off the bottom of the table. They'd lost 4 straight. It was a young squad. You talked right away about how easy it is to lose confidence. You channeled Churchill's quote for depression. You said sometimes you can let the black dog take over. That's the Hodgson-Turner phrase that we missed.
Well, I never said that, I'm afraid. I didn't even know that Churchill said that. So occasionally, if you've got any sort of ability with words whatsoever, people are kind enough to give you quotes you don't know yourself. So,
what did you tell the players the first day you walked into the training ground?
I didn't tell them much at all straight away. I don't think it's a very good idea to have these Churchillian type speeches. I don't think that's what players want. I think what they want is to see that from the very first day, the way you're going to treat them, the way you're going to have dealings with them, and more importantly, what you're going to put in front of them in terms of, you know, the training, the structure, the ideas in terms of how you'd like the team to play, and most importantly, the support that you're going to give them. That's what they want to see, really. Now, they want to see it more than hear it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was a question of, making clear to everyone how pleased I was to be back, how pleased I was to see so many of them who've been so good to me during that 4-year spell that I'd left behind 2 years earlier. But that was done very quickly, and it was almost straight away onto the training field. Right, let's get down to deciding and working on what we're going to do to get ourselves out of a situation.
You had 11 days between agreeing and then your first game. What are the biggest adjustments that you can make in that time? Are they tactical? Are they personnel? Are they psychological?
I think it's personnel in the sense of getting to know some of the ones that you haven't worked with before, while at the same time reminding the ones that you have worked with before that the way we worked and the way we worked together, which we thought was good, that's going to continue. We haven't changed in the year or two that you haven't worked with us. We are still the same people, myself and Ray Lewington. We've got another young coach now in Paddy McCarthy instead of David Reddington. But the way we're going to work, Dean Kiley's still with us. We're going to work in the same way, so you won't have any big surprises. It will still be what perhaps you were thinking it was going to be like, but it's a new group of players, and there's some here that I don't know so well, and it will be very interesting for me to see what these new players have brought to the team, because I'd seen in the year and a half that the players that have been brought in were exceptional talents. I mean, the difference between the squad that I inherited in 23 and the one I worked with for 4 years was that in the 4 years we were working on free transfers and loans until we actually signed Eze towards the end of my 4th year. Suddenly I find 4 to 5 players of exceptional talent who've broken into the team and given us another dimension, in my opinion.
And we'll talk about that other dimension, but can you tell us now, inside your own heart before that first game, what did you really think was possible and achievable? Were you like, yes, we're going to blow everybody away, we're going to do this? Or were you like, oof?
No, you don't think that ever, I don't think, especially when you've had as many games as I've had and as much experience. You mustn't even allow yourself, except when you dream, because dreams are made really to be unrealistic. So you can dream it, but if you're actually thinking about doing something about it. But what we did decide was that the one thing we really had to get from the players, after trying to give them the feeling that we're going to be okay here, was that degree of intensity and power. And we looked at the team, and we looked at Elise on the right, we looked at Wilf, we looked at Eze, and we thought, and Jeff Schlupp was playing. We looked at those 4 players just to start with. We thought, this is enormous strength, power and talent we've got here. We've got to try and unleash that as much as we can, which will involve to some extent taking a bit of a chance, because we've got to give them really more than free rein. We've got to almost insist that they play with the intensity, with the risk taking almost that we will need to see from them if we're going to win the games. Because we also worked out, which wasn't difficult to work out, that the fans needed to be brought back on board because they'd lost a little bit of faith over the last 10 or 12 games. They had to see a team which, even if it didn't go our way, even if we, as we could have done, because after absolutely battering them for 60 minutes, we find ourselves 1-0 down. We had to give the fans the belief that whatever happens, the way this group is working, the way this group is approaching the subject of getting us back up the table, that is the right approach.
It was low. Your team hadn't won since December 31st. And the story the media had attached to the Roy Hodgson return was that you were, quote, a safe pair of hands, pragmatic, take what you can get, defensive shape, risk-averse football. So, yeah, your Palace flew out 20 shots on goal in the first half against Leicester, and a 94th minute winner from Jean-Philippe Mateta to cap off a thrilling 2-1 win. You talked about hope, giving hope to the fans of the team after that one. And football can create hope, can also deliver sucker punches. And against Leicester, you lost Wilf Zaha to injury, centrepiece of the Palace attacks of old. A player where you had a uniquely productive relationship, but even without him, Next game, you ran riot against Leeds, 5-1 winners, pioneered by the young creative talents of Eberici Eze and Michael Olise. And what you said about them after the game was one of my favourite things I read all season. You said, we coaches are orchestra leaders. We know the music, we know all the notes, but they have to play the tune.
I did say that.
And you seem to really derive joy from the one-on-one work with the players, Roy. What's special about that process?
I think the worst thing about, especially when you've been in football a long time, is that people will decide upon you as a coach and what you are as a coach over a little period of time. In the 4 years I was with Crystal Palace, I would say that's probably the best job in some ways I'd ever done, because really with the lack of investment that we were able to make, with the fact that there were so many players who were ageing around us, the last 7 or 8 games of the season, then we had 8 players out of contract and not knowing whether they were going to stay or not at the club. So with all of those things, we still managed to keep that club in the league. Now, to do that, of course, it perhaps wasn't possible to play the sort of football that this team is playing, because it's a very, very different team. But many teams I've had in the past, I mean, the first job I had in 1976, there was a team that had only avoided relegation on goal difference, and yet the following season we won the league and scored a record number of goals in doing so. So, you know, those type of quotes that you've got there from journalists who haven't got any clue really, other than to say, well, we're watching it at the moment and it's this type of football. Perhaps it was, but the fact is that was the type of football that the club needed. If the club had wanted a different type of football, which maybe would have taken us out of the league, I don't think the supporters would have been very happy. I think they were more than happy that we stayed in and they got their reward for that sort of period of attrition, which we had to some extent during that period of 4 years, at least during the latter part of it, in big investment when I left, £100 million suddenly being spent and players coming in, and the opportunity then to build a different type of team.
Context is everything, ultimately. And let's talk about one of those players. Eze, Roy, a player who came to the club in your final season as manager in 2021. And he said back then that you gave him valuable insight in how to enter and handle the Premier League. And he's really beginning to fulfill his promise now, a fully fledged English international. And he credited you when he was called up to the national team, to the work you'd done with his, quote, mental state. He said, Roy Hodgson opened my eyes, how to carry myself, how to see things, understanding that it's not all about the short term, but the long term, and making the decisions that will best serve me in the long term. Tell us from your end, what did you unleash to find the full explosive abilities of a player who'd always been undoubtedly talent-soaked, but had occasionally seemed lost?
I think that players can so quickly lose confidence. And, you know, I think it's easy sometimes for someone like myself with experience to put that lack of confidence into perspective and to focus instead on the things they can do. I remember I did a quote with him from the Dalai Lama, because I think he was getting upset about things that were being written, things that were being said about him, criticisms coming his way. And there's a quote from the Dalai Lama, which I can't remember exactly what it is now, but it's basically, you know, don't believe anything that you are not convinced is true, and that you strictly don't believe yourself, then don't believe it, even if I myself, the Dalai Lama, have said it. And I just made that quote. He's a bright boy, so he was able to see through that quote and pick out of it perhaps what I would myself would pick out of it. And then what we did was we went back to encouraging him to do the things that we knew he was good at, why we bought him. And we said that, you know, we bought you because you are so good at these things. Now, because you play the type of football you do, things will go wrong more often, perhaps, than the player who doesn't take any risks and just passes the ball backwards and sideways. But we're going to back you to do the things you want to do. It will go wrong. There will be moments when things don't go your way, but we're behind you and we will be taking a lot of the responsibility for any mistakes you make. Now, I think that's just simple leadership. You know, that's what all leaders really should be able to say they do. So it wasn't that complicated.
We've got the Dalai Lama to thank for Eze's ascent, and what an ascent. Those first two matches, Palace full of belief marched on, picking up points, an aptitude for attacking intent, honestly, defied expectations. There's one blip, slight bit of miscontrol from you when a ball fell to you on the sideline.
The eyes are going, I'm afraid.
I think the sun was in your eyes, to be fair, Roy.
The eyes are going.
It was fascinating, though, to see you reveal the ability to produce this kind of football, Roy. You're defying expectations. Palace averaged 16 shots and 2 goals a game, almost double the team's numbers over the season before. I mean, people seem to forget that you once coached Ronaldo, Fenomeno, Roberto Carlos.
You missed out Badger, one of the best of the lot.
God bless, talking about I mean, he's as close to the Dalai Lama in football boots, that gentleman, in every regard. God, you now make me want to get Everton to sign Baggio right now. And then the win over West Ham, that all but officially secured Palace's safety in the Premier League. An incredible achievement, particularly considering where Palace have come from in the last 10 or so years, having been in administration, 9 players on their books to 11 straight top-flight seasons. And I could tell you relished telling the media that you were safe after that West Ham game. How important is it to you to recognise and celebrate good news in football? Because it was beautiful to watch it.
Well, it is, and I think the news you've put in front of the world that your podcast reaches is even more important. That this club, before Parish stepped in and with 3 of his friends, to rescue it from administration. And that's a relatively short period of time in footballing terms. We're not going back to the 40s and 50s. We're going back to a period of time just around about 20 years ago, Joe, is it maybe? Just over 10 years ago. Well, that's the most remarkable thing. Forget what you've been saying about what's happened with the team, but to take that team, which is on its way really into the 3rd tier of English football, and then have now a period of time where we've had 11 successive Premiership years. That really was the crowning achievement, in my opinion, of leadership. And of course, as a result of that, Steve Parish has managed to maintain that degree of pragmatism that he's asked me to have as well, because he knows that the difference between success and failure is very small, and he also knows that large investments in the team won't necessarily get you what you really want, and could end up, like it does for many football teams, pushing them further towards the depth of despair. So he's the one really who deserves the credit for that.
Last 3 games of the season, a celebration. A delightful Eze double against Bournemouth, final day draw at home to Forest, memorable reception for you during a 2-2 draw at Craven Cottage, where you once won a Manager of the Year award with Fulham. I mean, personal or professional, where does this cameo of an experience stand for you in your career? And do you have one memory from the 10 games that you treasure above all?
Well, the memory from the 10 games with the opening 45 minutes against Leicester, we absolutely blew them away. To come in at 0-0, that was the only thing. To watch that and to see the number of shots, the number of chances, the number of near misses, seeing Leicester literally clinging by their fingertips to stay with us, and yet to come in 0-0. And I think it was very strong of the players there was no to say at half time, except, well, that is it. That was everything that we've dreamt of seeing from you. You're delivering, well done. Now, make certain you don't let it slip. Don't take the foot off the gas. Don't let this intensity diminish.
Then. You knew.
Well, I knew until they got the opening goal against the run of play in 65 minutes. Because then you think, well, hold on. Football isn't. It's not a beauty contest. That's the first thing you have to realise. Football has never been a beauty contest. Football has been a question of being good enough with the players that you've got on the field to win the game. And to win football matches, sometimes you have to do lots of very, very different things in the game. And probably if you ask me, well, that game which will live long in the memory, what was the most important thing that you took from the game? It was that we were able to actually put aside the injustice of playing this well. We should be leading 4-0 and we're 1-0 down, and yet to turn it into a 2-1 victory. That would be the most important.
In the way you decided to go again, another season, to continue walking through a door that you thought had shut tightly behind you. Was it a difficult decision? Was there any moment of hesitation?
Yes, there was, because to be fair, I told my wife when I left Finland at the end of 2007 that now was going to be a period of at least semi-retirement to start off with, as I returned to Inter to work with Massimo Moratti as a sort of a right-hand man, but no longer a coach. And strangely enough, that has really provoked, probably the best 15 years in some way of what had been a decent or even a good career up to then. So these last 15 years have been fantastic. But there is always that in my mind that every time I accept a job, I invest myself in that job totally. So it pushes my wife back to a stage where basically, her life is nowhere near as exciting as it can be when we're together, when we can travel and do things. So I suppose there was a hesitation there, and I have her to thank for saying to me, look, you like the job, that you can still do it, you've still got the energy, do it. But of course, I don't know that I can continue forever, and I did make it very clear to Steve and Doug that if they can give me some days off from time to time so I can take my wife somewhere in the international breaks and things like that, then I'll use that. But really, it wasn't. I would say these two returns to Crystal Palace, this one slightly less of a return because I was the manager who finished the last season. They have both come as complete surprises, and on each occasion, I've had to get the assurances that I need from the club that this is something you really want to do, because it's not me saying to you, I think you should give me the job, or I think you should keep me on. It's got to be you saying, look, we've looked at other people, we've just thought about our future, we've made plans maybe even for the future, but at this moment in time, we want you back. And it was them convincing me that was truly the case that made it easy for me to accept and, to take on really what is an honour. It's an honour to get any management jobs, to get a management job in the Premier League at my age at a club that you admire so much. That's fantastic.
You're about to start a new season, but this is a season you never thought you would have. This career.
There's been loads of those.
This career, which has been remarkable to witness from the outside, and I've loved hearing about it. If you were to speak to a young audience, what's a lesson about life that you take from your own arc of coming back and coming back to something that you love, even sacrificing things that are clearly very important to you in the process? What's a lesson about life you take from your own journey?
I haven't made sacrifices. My wife has made sacrifices. Yeah. I've just selfishly gone about doing what I really love to do and being grateful for the opportunities that come my way, really. So if anyone suffered really from what I've been doing, it would be my wife and my son. So I don't take credit for that at all. I don't know that I'm a particularly resilient person. I don't even know that that's the word that I suppose should come to mind. I think it's been more the fact that I've come to terms with the fact that the way that I do approach the job can be successful. If I can get a group of players around me who have the same ideas, if you like, about football, the same ideas about what it means to be a professional footballer, what it means to try and win matches, I still believe that it's possible to lead that group to where they want to get.
And that buzz for you is the same. The buzz is the same now as it was at the beginning.
I jump around a little bit less because I'm not as fit in that respect as I was, and my good left foot that saw me through the early stage of my career has disappeared completely. I can hardly kick the ball with my left foot anymore, and furthermore, my eyesight, which has always been fantastic, occasionally lets me down as well. When the ball reaches me either before or after I think it should have done, but apart from that, it's not too different.
Apart from that, you're 2020. Roy, you are a legend to you, to your team, to your wife, and your future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Listen to the full version of this podcast and all our podcasts wherever you get your pods. But first, subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos and courage.